last couple chapters of Revelation. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Abba, we come before you once more. And Lord, as always, we ask for your guidance and your direction as we study your word. Father, we need you with us. We need you within us. Lord, we need you to give us eyes and ears to see and hear the wonders that are in your word. Father, we long to understand you, to see what is coming ahead accurately, and to understand so we can prepare ourselves and get in line and in sync with you. So, Father, we just ask your Spirit would anoint us, would anoint the congregation and give us wisdom and insight and discernment. And, Father, give us a heart of just a deep passion for your word and who you are in your ways. Hashem Yeshua. Amen. We're going to read here again in chapter 21, verse 1. We're going to focus here on verse 5 is where we're starting. But to give you a context. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And we've talked about that before. That's a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, it says in the Hebrew. For the old heaven and the old earth had passed away, and the sea was no longer there. Also I saw the holy city, the new Yerushalayim, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, God's Shekinah is with mankind, and he will live with him, with them. They will be his people, and he himself, God with them, will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death, and there will no longer be any mourning, crying, or pain, because the old order has passed away." Then the one, that's a big capital one, sitting on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." Also he said, "Write, these words are true and trustworthy." And he said to me, "It is done. I am," and in some of your verses it says, the Alpha and the Omega, the A and the Z. In the Hebrew it's the Aleph and the Tav, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Which means what in word pictures? The first strong sign of the covenant. Okay, it's always been a symbol for the Messiah, or the first and the last. I am the first and the last, the beginning and the end. To anyone who is thirsty, I myself will give water free of charge from the fountain of life.
I want to play off of this idea of new heaven and new earth, and in verse 5, he who sits on the throne, he's going to make all things new. The word there is hashah, and it can mean new, but it also means kind of fixed up, shinied up. It's used in the sense of the new moon, and we all know that every month there's a brand new moon God creates. No. Every month there's the same old moon is just rejuvenated, right? Or it appears to be rejuvenated.
It's coming around in its cycle.
Right. By its orientation with the sun and the earth, it looks like it's a new moon, but it's not really. It's just rejuvenated. And that's the sense here, I think, of what God is doing. Because there's so many parallels. In fact, I just kind of was sitting around yesterday thinking about the parallels of the old and the new. And I was going, God, I came up with a dozen just sitting there without doing a whole lot of research. And I'm going, there's a whole bunch more. Adam and I have mentioned this many times, where when God created the heaven and the earth the first time, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and then we came along and messed up the whole thing. And God said, not to worry, I can fix this. And so we finally got to the point where he's fixing it once and for all, isn't he? That's right. But it's interesting, there are some distinct differences. There's some people that should be there that aren't there, but there's a lot of commonalities. And it's kind of interesting going, why are there commonalities? But it was obvious to me that God had a model in the beginning, in Genesis, that he is using for the renewed earth. Some of the things that popped into my mind is that God dwells there. We don't get that sense sometimes that God dwelt in the garden. But you know what I believe? I think God lived in the garden with Adam and Eve. And he had to move. It's kind of like when a couple does some dumb things and one spouse gets thrown out and one has to go rent an apartment? I think that's what happened. We had this relationship, this intimate relationship Adam and Eve did with God, and we gave him a writ of divorce. We threw him out of the home, Eden.
But in reality, he threw us out of the home.
Yeah, exactly. But he couldn't associate himself with death because he can't. Death and life don't commingle very well, do they? So what did he do? Well, he moved to the apartment, we call that heaven. And we think, well, no, that can't be right. We're going to heaven. Right? No, we're not. Well, that's a little depot. But as we're going to learn, where does God hone back to? Home back to. Is it heaven that we end up in? No. We're going to see, and I think we've already touched on it. What do we see? God comes back to earth. Yeah, it's kind of renewed.
And he brings heaven with him.
Exactly. They married together again. Well, that's interesting. We're going to learn about Jerusalem here. We see her descending from the sky, from heaven. And anyway.
John, I don't think heaven and earth was ever meant to be separated.
Exactly.
That's why God, when he originally created it in the garden, the understanding was heaven and earth were intermingled. They were one. There was no division between the spirit realm and the physical realm. They coexisted together.
That's why when you look in the Hebrew, there's a word for heaven, but it has multiple meanings. It means the heavens that the birds fly in, the heavens that the stars dwell in, and the heaven that God has his apartment in. So we see God coming back to earth, dwelling on earth, which is where he started with this whole creation thing. Why he messed with us, I'm not sure why, but that's his choice. And what else do we see that's common? Well, the apple of his eye. And again, I'm not sure why we're the apple of his eye, but he started at the center of the garden, he put Adam and Eve. And at the center of the renewed earth, Adam and Eve, mankind. Mankind is put right back into the place God chose for her to be, which is where? Right next to him. Isn't that cool? And then other parallels that just jumped into my little mind. You know, in Genesis, we have a river flowing from the presence of God eastward into the Garden of Eden, which is a whole big giant lesson in and of itself, but I won't go there. And what do we have in Revelation here? After the 1,000-year reign, which we're done with the 1,000-year reign, or post-1,000-year reign, what is happening? We haven't gotten there in the text yet, but there's a river. God sets up his throne, and what flows from the throne?
River of life.
The river of life flows from the throne of God. And there's a couple of passages, one here in Revelation, another one, I should have looked this up, it's either Ezekiel or Isaiah. It's a beautiful description and an expounding of what Revelation spends a couple of verses on, about this river. And it goes into much more detail about this river that flows from the throne of God, and it goes through the Kidron Valley, and it flows eventually, which is where the Kidron flows when it's not, it's an ephemeral river, so it doesn't flow all year round. But if it did, it would flow to the Dead Sea, wouldn't it? And I think it's Isaiah, but whichever it is, it talks about all the life that this river brings to the Dead Sea, and how fish are going to populate the Dead Sea, which is like, no, there's no fish in the Dead Sea now. That's why they call it dead.
That's right. Currently, there is no life whatsoever. In fact, you almost see this distinction between the Galilee and the Dead Sea. One is completely dead, no vegetation, nothing flies, and the other one is teeming with life.
Right. And we see the same thing in the Garden of Eden. we see this river flowing from God, and where does it flow? Just meanders off accidentally somewhere? No, it's targeted to mankind. It flows right into the garden where God has placed mankind, and there it causes everything to flourish, to feed mankind.
John, that sounds an awful lot like what it used to be.
Exactly.
And that's why I think what you're saying is you're seeing these parallels. You're going, wait. God is not like, see, too many times I've heard this taught in a way that like, well, you know, God just wipes all this, he pulls us all out, wipes all this out, and he's got another earth just waiting in the wings, like off in another solar system or something. It's kind of the imagery that's conveyed, and he kind of brings that in the spot where this should be. But that's not what's taking place. God is not destroying this, obliterating it where it doesn't exist. He's wiping out all the death and sin and what's connected to it, and then renewing it to what it should have been all the time.
And he's putting an extra little shine on it, because there are some really cool changes that he makes, which is interesting, which could be a whole topic for another lesson that I don't know yet. But more things to know and learn. But guess what is flowing in after the 1,000-year reign here in Revelation as well as in the prophets, where it talks about this river. Guess what's flowing along the shores of this river of life? I gave you a hint right there. The tree of life. That's really good. The tree of life. And what is it there for?
Healing of the nations.
The healing of the leaves are for the healing of the nation, and it has like 12
Fruits.
different fruits,
every
one each month, which so if you get tired of oranges, then it flips over to apples, I guess, I don't know.
They're going to be.
Maybe it has multiple branches, and each branch is working on one kind of fruit. I don't know, God knows, he's got a pretty cool system going on here. But it's this really interesting tree. Adam had a vision of this tree where the thing was like huge. Remember, what was the name of that movie?
You're talking Avatar.
Remember that thing?
It did not
look like that, but it was big.
John, this wasn't a vision. What it looked like, all I can tell you is what God showed me. This was several months ago. What I saw was a shadowed version. And as it came up, the canopy expanded and was as big as the sky. Does that make sense? I mean, I was looking at this and I went, what? That is huge, where you couldn't see an end to the canopy. Does that make sense? That's what we saw.
Well, that's interesting, because what popped into my mind just now was Daniel's. Actually, it was Nebuchadnezzar's vision, where his kingdom was pictured as a huge tree. You know, that goes some places, doesn't it? Because God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to provide, remember that tree provided food and safety and shelter for life, mankind, as well as the birds and its branches. It goes on in detail in Daniel. And then Nebuchadnezzar falls, doesn't he? He has a bad hair day. In fact, it's many bad hair days. He falls away from God and thinks he's God. And the image kind of switches, doesn't it? It's like Satan is offering the same tree with the same hope. Except the apples are rotten and the oranges have...
It's not the same tree.
They're not navel oranges.
Taking like navel oranges.
Yeah, well, of course, he doesn't like navel oranges. Satan is a copycatter, isn't he? Everywhere you look, he's trying to emulate God. He knows what God's going to do, and he's trying to look like God, too. So anyway, this tree of life is, of course, we all know it's at the center of the Garden of Eden. And where is it here? It's along the shore of this river that flows from the throne of God to the Dead Sea. And we don't think about this very much, but you know, when Adam and Eve were alive, they didn't die. They weren't dying before they sinned, right? When they were hanging out in the Garden of Eden, eating what they should have been eating, they weren't dying.
No pain, no suffering,
Yeah.
no death.
Well, didn't we just read something like that? Well, I guess that's coming up here. There's some verses here just coming up where there's no more mourning, weeping, and all this stuff.
In other words, it's back to how it used to be.
Exactly. And so Adam and Eve weren't dying. And guess what happens here? We're going to find here in the last couple of chapters here in Revelation, there's no more death, there's no more weeping. God has restored it back to the situation that existed in the Garden of Eden. Boy, what a price tag sin has, doesn't it? I mean, when you start thinking about all the sadness that sin has brought, and we're not just blaming Adam and Eve here, right? Because how many of us have not contributed to the pile that God died on the cross for? I didn't see any hands go up. Both places, whether you're in the Garden of Eden or in this special place, after the 1,000-year reign, mankind gets to live with God. And the coolest part of all, we can commune with Him face to face. He, for some reason, the creator of the universe, the most powerful being you can imagine, actually wants to talk with little old me face to face. And you, face to face. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, think about that. What is man that God is mindful of us?
We are His children.
Yeah, why? Why doesn't He just like most people, wherever it was, why don't you just start over? You know, these guys aren't working out. Let's just start with... For some reason, God is a covenant God, and He doesn't change His mind when He makes a promise. We rule and reign with God in both instances. We don't think that Adam and Eve were ruling and reigning, but if you read the text before they fell, God gave, it was the only commandment other than the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It was the other directive for them, and the rabbis believe it was the first law that they were given, which was rule, it was to manage the creation.
And
Go out.
fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, to be fruitful and multiply, but in the process, do it wisely. And mankind has done a fabulous job.
No.
No, you're not kidding me, right? Unfortunately, we have not. But in spite of the fact that our history has not been very dazzling in God's eyes, He's willing to risk it again. During the after the 1,000-year reign, what does He do? We sit by His side, ruling and reigning over the place. Go figure. Now, this is a little interesting and maybe a little. I don't want to spend this much time on it, but it appears that there's, and I have to qualify this, but it appears like there's no more red meat eaten. There wasn't before. Remember, what was for food
The leaves of the trees,
prior to the flood?
all the vegetables and the fruit of the trees.
God grew plants out of the ground and made them available for food, not meat. They were vegetarians before. Adam and Eve were vegetarians. Read the text. It's very startling. There's no meat eating ever recorded prior to Noah.
That's right.
And
Well,
the directive,
There was some by the bad guys.
by the bad guys, yeah.
That's right.
Which, of course, we're not.
We're not saying that eating meat now is unbiblical.
No, of course.
God mandated it.
Remember the rainbow covenant? Remember that? The flood happens and God sees this, or God sends this rainbow. Part of that covenant and the change that occurred is he broadened the menu for man to include meat. Now, during this time period in the future, remember that little passage that says the lamb's going to sit down with the lion? Not trepidatiously, by the way. In other words, the lamb's not shivering, wondering how many more minutes it has before the lion gets hungry. But they're at peace. It sounds like the situation has been restored to the Garden of Eden, right? So you get this idea that the animals, as well as potentially mankind, is not eating red meat as well. But, and the reason why I said red meat, which gets into a whole new potential teaching, which I don't know anything about yet. There's a lot of things I don't know very much about. But there's another passage that I'm referring to in the prophets that talk about this river that flows from the throne into the Dead Sea. It says that men will fish in the Dead Sea. Remember this? They'll fish in the Dead Sea during this time period. And they'll just throw the fish away. No, they'll eat them. So maybe, I was thinking about this week, going, maybe things that have life have the breath. Remember we talked about the Nishma, the Spirit of God, and both were breathed into all these living creatures. And maybe there's something where fish are a different kind of being. I don't know, kind of an interesting speculation, because they don't have the breath. They get their oxygen via the water. They don't have the breath they don't breathe in air, And it's interesting that God segregates it out like this, too. When you read passages, he separates out the fish from the other land or air-breathing animals. Interesting place to go. Eden, the dwelling in Eden started after 7 days, right? Well, the dwelling in this new kingdom starts after 7 millennia, right? And of course, there's no death in either one. We talked about that. And in both cases, he talks about it's finished. It's done. He rested on the 7th day because he got tired. No, God doesn't get tired because the work was done. Right? And here we're going to see where he makes the proclamation, it is done. In both cases, the doneness is of covenant promises. And in this last one, it's done because he has finally, we're going to see here in the text, it's going to say this, he has completed the promise in covenant to us to remove death and all things impure and give us a home that's been fixed. And, we haven't talked about this in a while, but, when we were back a couple chapters, the bride, what does the bride wear? A checkered, kind of red, blue? No. It's a white garment. And, oh, good, we already got it up there. Explain.
Explain.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, who here does not know Hebrew? Raise your hand. It's all right. Okay. Real quick. Andy, you should be raising your hand. You know this, right? You know some of this. All right. The Hebrew alphabet, real quick. The letters are phonetic, but they're also pictographic. So each letter is a word picture. Like this is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph. That means the first strong. Okay? The first of the strong, and the symbol is that of an ox. So it's pictographic. I won't go into its mathematic and numerical as well. But it's interesting when you look at specific Hebrew words that are used in Scripture for specific things. Like one of the words for man and woman, they're like Adam is one of the words, is the name of man, and that means something. But one of the words for man is Ish, and then one of the words for woman is Isha. And Hebrew goes from right to left. Okay? And what's interesting is this. These two letters right here, the aleph and the shin, here and here and here, in both words for man and woman, is the word for fire. It's esh. It means fire. And the imagery is the first strong consumer. Okay, this means this is a picture for teeth, to consume or destroy, or the first strong destroyer. Fire destroys, right? Correct? Okay, so the word pictures actually convey some understanding of the item it's named for, if you will. So, embedded within the word for man and woman is the word for fire. And the understanding Hebraically is this: when you double up on something, so man and woman together is a double fire. In Hebrew, when you double up on something, when you say fire of fires, or tongue of tongues, or king of kings, lord of lords, that's supposed to be the pinnacle, the highest of something. Okay? The tongue of tongues, you know what that means in Hebrew? It's a Hebrew word for prayer. The Hebrew word for prayer means the tongue of tongues. There's no higher language you can speak than prayer. So, king of kings and lord of lords. Who is that? What is that phrase used for? It's for God, it's for Yeshua, it's for the Messiah. So there's no greater king, no greater authority or ruler than God and the Messiah, right? Well, fire of fires would be for man and woman together. Okay? Now that's man and woman without two specific letters that are added here. A Yud and a He. If you take those letters out, you have a double fire. A great destroyer, a doubling, or the highest pinnacle of a destroyer. So man and woman without these two letters is the pinnacle of something that destroys. The two letters that are put in here are the Yud and the He. And anybody who knows their Hebrew knows what this is. It's the word Yah. It's the name of God. When man and woman are joined together in holy matrimony, God is revealed in their midst. This is what Paul was talking about in Scripture when he talks about, behold, I show you a mystery. You know, man and woman together, the marriage is a symbol of our relationship with God. God is revealed in marriage. He was addressing these Hebrew words. He knew this. This is the understanding Hebraically. So man and woman, Adam and Eve, in the garden, Ish and Isha is the word that's used here, reveals God to the creation. That's the understanding. Is that where you want to go with it?
Yeah. So the question then is being begged here. How many of our relationships are revealing God?
One hand.
There's some hands going up. Yes. And as Adam said, you look at your relationship and it might not be like golden. But you still have to struggle, even with God, to figure out how to live with Him. Don't you? And so our earthly marriages are practice sessions for the ultimate marriage to come. Okay? So don't get frustrated because, the toothpaste isn't being squeezed correctly by your spouse. Struggle to get along.
Come on, John. Life is all about toothpaste.
Well, that was probably a bad example, because there is a proper way to do it.
Your wife turns around and looks listen to you.
Let me tell you, I do not have any sort of proper way to do things. But as long as it comes out, that's all I care about. Now, what Jody does, however, which drives me crazy, is like, I just squeeze this puppy so there's nothing else coming out, right? Well, I can't throw it away because it stays in the drawer, because someday she's going to snip it, the thing, and amazingly, there's like 1 or 2 more toothbrushfuls.
This is great. You get to say this while she has to sign.
She's probably signing the guy's home. Don't believe it, Ann. But anyway, this whole thing here, but going back to our marriages, don't be frustrated if everything isn't perfect, but realize the purpose of marriage. It's to figure it out now. So when you get to heaven and then back to earth, you've got a lot of work already under the table. You've got a lot of experience and success already deposited in your bank, right? The point of all of this, other than all this fascinating stuff, you know, a lot of things come to mind. You know, there's 3 cords in a rope, makes it
Very strong.
stronger. What's the third cord? Yah is the third cord. You don't have Yah, your marriage is just a consuming fire, just like the photography is.
It's destructive.
But the cool part about why did God choose the root words of man and woman to be fire? What? Why not Twinkies or something? Anything. Well, why? There's a purpose. God doesn't just roll the dice and go, okay, it came up Twinkies. We're going to call man and woman Twinkies. No, there's fire. Why? Is he calling the base word in Hebrew for man and woman fire?
To consume chaos.
Well, yeah,
Because it
that's
doesn't
very
really
good. That's
destroy
very
the
good.
pure
Joe,
ones.
do we have an answer here? Excellent response, Stella.
Make sure it's turned on. Hey,
Turn the mic on.
microphone on.
There we go.
Well, it's one of my favorites, thanks for asking. Well, doesn't Sheen also perhaps represent the Shekinah glory?
The shin, okay? The shin is like on the mezuzah, so we put on our doorpost, we put a shin on there that represents the Shekinah, or the cloud of glory of God,
So fire,
and the Almighty.
or God is a consuming fire, or the Sheen, we see.
God is a consuming fire, that's
So
correct.
we see in terms of the word pictures built into the Hebrew, that Adam and Eve glowed with the Shekinah glory of Yeshua, which we saw revealed to Moses, we saw on the Mount Transfiguration.
They were on fire.
Yeah.
They glowed with light. Scripture says that God is clothed in light. And then in Genesis it said man and woman were created in God's image. So if he was clothed in light, they were clothed in light?
Right?
Yes.
We love it. And the fun part for us as we look forward, he promises for us Shekinah glory.
Shekinah glory.
In our
And to be
lives.
clothed
That we will be clothed in light. We will see him as he is because
We are like him. Like him. That's what
he will
Scripture says.
glorify us as he is glorified. We take it literally. We love it, Lord. We love you, Lord.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stella brought up an interesting point. You can move the mic over, Ryan, or whatever while I'm talking. But this consuming fire can go both ways. And so you want to ask yourself this question. You personally and in your relationships, especially your marriage relationships, if you're married, ask the question, am I a consuming fire in the positive? You can consume sin and destructive habits. And in that sense, that's what God does. That's what his life does. He consumes sin. He consumes and shows us the way to, and teaches us the way to expunge and consume like a fire all these bad ways, all this satanic deception that comes our way. He highlights it and goes, look, consume that in your life. Stop those behaviors because they lead to destruction. So consume it. But on the negative side, or the positive side, no, the negative side, sorry, so also do bad habits and sin. What do? What did they do to Adam and Eve? What did sin do? It consumed their lives. And it consumes our life. How many people have run into other people, because we can observe it better than other people for some reason, that their lives are being consumed by their misbehaviors, misdeeds. I'm not talking about, setting off nuclear bombs. I'm talking about just dumb little things. Some little habit that you know isn't right, but they end up being consumed by it. Yes, we've seen people. Of course, we don't have those problems, but other people do.
Go ahead, Laura. Let's make sure this is on.
It can also mean purifying and refining.
Yeah, purifying and refining. And also fire, when you're in the dark or in the cold, is fire bad? No, what does it do? It brings light, illumination, it brings comfort, it brings warmth. Yeah, that's why many words in Hebrew have a flip side to them. They have a positive and a negative understanding.
Which embellishes a verse we haven't got to yet. Guess what there won't be the need of? It doesn't say that there won't be one, but it says there won't be the need of one.
Like the
A
sun.
sun. Why not? Everybody's walking around glowing. Right? I mean,
Well, it says God is their sun.
yeah.
The Messiah is their sun. He's glowing, but also, if we're restored to the state of how it was, then we will be clothed in light.
So there was light in the beginning, and in the end, the Adam and Eve were clothed in light, and in the end, I believe that the text says that God gives white garments to his bride. And who's coming with this God, this Messiah, riding on a white horse? And what are they decked out on? It's an army, and they're all decked out in their garments of white.
Right.
And the idea, I think, conveys pretty convincingly that his people that have gone through this struggle in life are going to be glowing. We're created in his image. I think he's also including the glowingness of his essence.
I want to just take a moment and mention something that is right in here, talking about Adam and Eve and all that we're talking about. God revealed to me last year. I know some of you know that I've been doing lots of journaling, talking with God, and I wish I had the journal here that he wrote this. God will speak to me, and he has me write down in my journal what he says. But it was specifically about this topic, and about the bride, and about creation. And this is what he showed me. So you check this out yourself, you see if this is true. This is what God told me. When Adam and Eve, when he created Adam, it was just Adam alone at first, right? And then he created animals, and he brought all the animals to Adam, and then he named them, right? And God said, it's good. But then he saw Adam alone, without a companion. And what did God say?
Not good.
It is not good. And so what did he say? I need to make a helpmeet. I need to make a companion. And I won't go into the words there for what a helpmeet is in Hebrew. It does mean this. Someone who is shoulder to shoulder with you and also face to face with you like a mirror. In other words, you look at and see, you're checking yourself out. Oh, I don't look so great. So spouses, when you look at your significant other, the one you're married to, and you're angry, it's probably the mirror being shown back at you, and you're really angry with yourself. Okay? When you're unkind to your spouse because you don't like what you see, it's looking back at you. Okay? But then he created Eve, or Hava in Hebrew was her name. And then he said, it's very good. And this is what God told me in the journaling when he pointed this out. He goes, remember that, Adam? I said, yeah. And he said, it's like that for him. What does Scripture say? That God looks to and fro. In all creation it says, there is no one else like me. He's singular. He's alone. There is no one else like God. And God said he created mankind. This is what he told me. He said, I created Adam and Eve, my image. Okay? Both of them together reveals God, the true image of God. He said, God is complete, but God desires a bride for himself. Because to be alone, it is not good. God wanted a bride. So he created mankind. And so when Eve was brought before him, said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. This is my bride. God said to me, he said, I long for the day when mankind, my bride, stands before me, pure, just like Adam and Eve, and I will say the same thing. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Here's the companion that I have been longing for, to be like me and share creation with. It's the same idea. When God said that to me, I was floored. I said, but God, you're complete. You have everything you need. He said, of course I do. But I long for one to be like me that I can share with. That's why he created us. That's why after all the mess ups we do, he's still trying to work with us. Okay?
Yeah. Maybe more than chills, maybe a little motivation. Yes. To clean things up. Because chills are fine.
They're good.
Cold, but otherwise, all they do is create a whole bunch of smoke, but not much light.
John, you're so unabashed.
Moving right along. I just wanted to say, Adam will probably jump in on this. Verse 6 here, it says, then he said to me, it is done, I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, and I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of water of life without cost. Adam already mentioned this, in many texts it says Alpha and Omega, but Alpha and Omega mean nothing more than A and Z mean. Okay, they're just the last and the first letters of two alphabets in the world. But when you go back to the roots, remember John was a Hebrew man, okay? He more than likely wrote this text in Hebrew, but even if he didn't, he was referring to the underlying meaning of the Aleph and the Tav. And Adam has said this last week and this week.
John, it's right here.
Yeah, how this thing's amazing to keep appearing on the board. How the pictography is pretty spectacular. It's the strong sign of the covenant. The sign of the covenant in ancient times, it wasn't written like this during the times that, in ancient times when the Torah was written, the Tav was written like that. And it has evolved into this. But when the Bible was originally written, especially the Torah, the Tav was the shape of a cross. So basically it's the first strong sign of the covenant. This is the sign of the covenant. We've talked about this in times past where, this whole cross thing, has anybody gotten a loan or bought a house lately? You notice the document where you're supposed to sign has an X. You know where that came from?
This.
It came from this. In ancient times, people that didn't know how to write, when they were like going to be, they would sign up for a job on a ship where they were going to work, a couple thousand years ago. Well, the owner of the ship would just say, put your mark.
In other words, make your covenant.
And they would put an X. That was their mark, because they knew that that was a covenant between the owner and themselves, that he was going to do his part, pay them, and they were going to do their part, work their little tails off, right? And that's the covenant. And it's kind of like our covenant. God paid the price, right? And then we are supposed to work. We're supposed to be lights to the world, and it takes energy to do that, doesn't it? But there's something more, even more granular here, I think, that this et word, because you pronounce this et. And Jody could do a whole long thing on this, but, and I can't, because I don't know, but she's an English-centric person, which is a compliment. I'm not denigrating that. And she's delved into Hebrew, and a lot of you that are taking her class already are way ahead of the curve here, but in the very first verse of Genesis, what does it say? What does it say, Adam? What's the Hebrew?
The Hebrew is Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginnings, created God et, this word, first.
Right.
The first strong sign of the covenant. The beginning and the end. The first and the last.
Now there's some Hebrew reasons why this word is next to God, Elohim, in that first verse. But it's interesting to note that it says in the beginning, in essence, in the beginning is the et God, who created the heavens and the earth. And I think it's a reference here. John is going, he's very familiar with this etymology, and he's referring back not to just any old God, but a special God that started out the first time this word is ever used in the Bible, which is always a demarcation of something important. The first time it's applied to this God, the first strong sign of the covenant God, the very one who died on the cross and made a covenant to expunge our sins by doing that.
John, and I think that's why in the verse here, as it says, then the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. Also he said, write, these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done, I am the et, the aleph, the top, the beginning, and the end. What he's saying is, he's putting his stamp. He's trying to say, I am the ultimate authority. That's what he's saying to creation, to John. This is true, it's trustworthy, you can bank on this no matter what, because I am this God. So you know, when I say it's going to happen, it's going to happen. He's basically giving his credentials on one level. Do you understand? He's giving his credentials. And he's saying, so what I'm saying here is absolutely going to happen, because I'm this guy.
Then could you read verse 8?
Yes, hands going up real quick, yes.
When I hear you saying, you say one's the beginning and one's the end, then that would say it's complete.
Yes.
You got the beginning and the end.
I started it, and I'm now finishing it. That's correct. Verse 8. Let me see. Well, let me read 6 and 7. He said to me, it is done. To anyone who is thirsty, I will give water free of charge from the fountain of life. He who wins the victory will receive these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the untrustworthy, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those involved with the occult and with drugs, idol worshippers, and all liars, their destiny is the lake burning with fire and sulfur, the second death.
We've touched on this second death thing, but I want to kind of pile on that just a little bit. We've talked about the first death, When did that occur? Basically, when you were born, you died. We've inherited death from Adam and Eve, right? Without God's payment, we're dead, right? And that's our destiny in completion at the end of the age, without faith and trust and reliance in the work of Yeshua on the cross, right? That was the first death. So what's the second death? We've touched on this already a little bit. The second death, remember back at the end of chapter 20, there's this great white throne judgment. It's at the end of the 1,000-year reign. So everybody that is going to be is now had their swing at the plate to get their faith lined up, right? And what happens? The great white throne judgment is called what? The second death, exactly. Because after that point,
There's no chance.
there's no more death, is the implication. It's done, it's complete, God's work is complete, it's finished. And then I ran across 1 Corinthians 15, 22, 26, which I think it deserves a read here because it kind of embellishes all of this and talks about, and Adam, as Adam read, what did the verse refer to about Hades there in verse 8?
It said,
It talks about all these sinners that,
right, those who are cowardly, untrustworthy, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the occult, drugs, idol worshippers, and liars.
right,
That's their destiny.
that's the destiny.
Is to live the fire.
Which is an interesting thing. God is going back now and doing a refresher course of what he just talked about in the previous chapter. And then 1 Corinthians 15, 22 through 26, it says, "For as in Adam all died," first death, so also in Yeshua, the Messiah, all will be made alive. But each in his own order. Yeshua, the first fruits. After that, those who are Yeshua's at his coming. You want to be part of that group, right? Then comes the end, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father, when he has abolished all rule and all authority and power. For he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy that will be abolished is death. So what's going on here? It's talking Yeshua, the Messiah, comes and reigns for 1,000 years, right? That's what Paul is saying here in 1 Corinthians. He must reign to put all what? Powers and authorities and abolish all rule under his feet. Well, who's he fighting during the 1,000-year reign? Who is he fighting? Man, you guys are good. Abaddon. He was the only guy. Remember, there was a triad. There was Abaddon, the false prophet. There was the Antichrist, who was incarnate Satan. And who else? The harlot, the whore, remember? Everybody was taken care of, except one person temporarily, Satan, except Abaddon. And we know that because there's death during the 1,000-year reign. Remember, we talked to everybody that. Interesting. So, this passage is saying that during this 1,000-year reign, there's still an authority, and right at the end, of course, we know Satan is released. But there's still authorities that are not under the feet of Yeshua yet. Right? But we know that that reign succeeds in accomplishing putting all authority, evil authority, and power under his feet, which is an interesting metaphor, you think. Under his feet? Why not, behind his back? That's where I want it.
No, I just got a picture of a warrior putting his foot on the neck of his enemy.
Well, it's a beautiful echo, and I've taught you guys this before about the constellations in the sky. And I don't go too far with this if you haven't heard this before. No, I'm not advocating astrology, okay? But I believe Satan has perverted it. And the actual pictures up in the sky were originally created by the creator of the sky, right? And the last constellation, Leo, the lion, which God is pictured as throughout the Bible, has his foot on top of what? The serpent. Remember? Hydra? And not just on his tail or on his stomach, but on what? His head, right? And it also echoes back to Genesis, where he's going to make a head wound in Satan, the snake. Remember that? So, God is putting these enemies under his feet. And it's interesting, which is kind of fascinating, but whenever you study these lake of fire, hell kinds of words, in mythology or biblical defining words, whenever you do any research, where do you find the location of hell?
Center of the earth.
Exactly, which is interesting, don't you think? So God is not being metaphorical here then. He's actually being literal, I suppose. They are going to be under his feet. I find that interesting.
Does it say that the foot is the earth is his footstool?
Yeah, it does. So he must reign, Yeshua must reign until he has put all of his enemies under his foot. In other words, he's put all of his enemies into the lake of fire. And this certainly occurs during the 1,000-year reign. And right at the end, Satan, the last of the triad, the evil triad, is put under his feet. Let's see. Let's read. How are we doing on time?
About 15 minutes.
Let's go to 9 and 10.
Verse 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the 7 angels, having the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues, approached me, this is John talking, and said, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb."
Okay, well, hold on. What is he going to show us now? Adam's going to read here. What's he going to show us? The bride. For some reason, I missed this for a long time. I just saw this Jerusalem coming out of the sky. But God is going to now show us the bride. Okay? Now, listen to what Adam reads here.
He carried me off in the Spirit to the top of a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It had the Shekinah of God, so that its brilliance was like that of a priceless jewel, like a crystal clear diamond. It had a great high wall with 12 gates. At the gates were 12 angels, and inscribed on the gates were the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. There were 3 gates to the east, 3 gates to the north, 3 gates to the south, and 3 gates to the west. Just like the camp of God was in the wilderness.
That's accident.
That's purely accidental. The wall of the city was built on 12 foundation stones, and on these were the 12 names of the 12 apostles or emissaries of the Lamb. That's huge.
There's so much here. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the 2 words that made up Jerusalem. Now remember, we're talking about bride here. Okay, because the bride is being described here as Jerusalem descending from heaven, right?
Now, do you think it's a city of Jerusalem without people? No. It's the city, meaning the people.
Right. Remember, I go away to prepare a place for you. You know, so it's what God's handiwork has accomplished while we've been waiting. And He has put her in this home that He's prepared for her. But Jerusalem, I touched on this a couple of weeks ago because it was kind of cool and it fit into what was happening in the text. But I want to refresh your memories. Remember, Jerusalem is made up of two words. The one everybody knows is shalom, Jerusalem, right? It's made up of shalom. What does shalom mean? It means peace, right? But it means more than just peace. What else does it mean? Complete. It means safety and peace, of course.
Harmony.
What?
Integrity, harmony.
Yes.
Yeah, it does. And so keep all of those ideas in mind, because I think it
John. Shalom.
right. The pictography is consume the authority that binds you to chaos. So the bride are people who have learned how to consume the authorities in their life that Satan has attached themselves to that bring evil and disrepair and corruption. So how are we doing all that? Are we fighting the good fight? Are we running the race like Paul? That's what shalom is all about. It's destroying the authorities that bind you to chaos.
In other words, you have peace when evil is destroyed.
That's right. When you go back, it's not sitting back, waiting for God to show up and do it. It's when you do it. Right? You take action. How many have gotten peace by just, in the midst of chaos, sitting back and doing nothing about it? Maybe worry. Now, that doesn't happen. But even in the midst of chaos, when you actually, okay, I don't have much I can do, but I'm going to do what I can do. You get peace from it, don't you? It's like, well, I did all I could do.
I just came up with a new phrase. You just inspired me. So when life is going terrible and things are falling apart, people say, how are you doing that? And I'm going to say, I'm establishing peace.
There you go.
I'm establishing peace in my life.
I'm going to work. And then the other word is Yara. And I just accidentally discovered this. Of course, this again was accidental. A couple days prior, for some reason, I was looking up the root word of Torah, which was Yara, right? And I go, well, that's interesting, Yara. Well, I don't have a good memory, but I did remember it for 2 days. Until I was looking up Jerusalem. God told me to look up Jerusalem. I go, okay, well, I don't know where that's going to go. Probably nothing there. Well, I realized after a little bit of looking up, I found shalom, and then the other word was Yara. Yara shalom. Jerusalem is the phonic transliteration. But
So it means the root word of Torah and shalom is the word for Jerusalem.
now think about the ramifications. We're talking about the bride. Don't forget that. Okay? Because that is the foundational ideas here. These two words is the foundational idea of the bride. So Yara is the root word of Torah. Yara. Okay? Well, what are the implications of that? And it's scary. Because it means work. Remember 1 Corinthians? Is that chapter 3? All of some people's works will be burnt up.
Chapter 5.
Not how you want to show up in front of God, right? And they're still in heaven. They still go to be with God. But they got nothing to show for their life. But there's some people that have works that stand the test of. What kind of works do you think those are? Obedience to God's ways, His principles, His Torah. Those are the works that He's calling us into. Right? So, okay, back to the bride thing. So this Shalom means foundation and peace. What's some other meanings? Safety. It's a safe foundation. On what? Where do we find safety?
God's presence.
God's presence. But how do we, not how do we get there? How do we become the bride? How do we get these white garments? Because remember the white garments, chapter 8:19, it says the white garments represent her works, not her faith.
It's both.
So how do we, what works are we talking about? It's the works of Torah. They weren't abolished. They were there to make us Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is a description of the bride. So what's your foundation? Is your foundation of life your own making, society's making, your parents' making, your own feelings making? And should they be any of those things? No. They should be what? A foundation that God originally gave us that would provide us with safety and peace. Consume the authority that binds you to chaos, which chaos is procured by not following the ways of God, not following Torah. Right?
John, the word Yerah also means foundation.
Exactly.
Yerah means foundation, to sprinkle with water, to flow as water, to shoot and arrows like an archer, so on and so forth.
And then this text goes, and Adam read it, it's just profound. It goes on, and remember, we're talking about the bride. And it has 12 gates. And what are the names of the gates?
Tribes of Israel. Tribes of Israel.
The tribes of Israel. Wait a minute here. The tribes of Israel. Okay, this is the bride. Now recall, Adam and I have taught this a long time, but what did God call Israel from Mount Sinai on? Remember, Mount Sinai is a big event because that's when the people made a covenant with God. What did he call them from there on?
His people, his treasure, his bride.
His bride. Okay? So, what was, now, some of you are sitting there going, well, I'm not of Jewish descent, so what am I, chopped liver? No. Who went over the Red Sea? Was it just 12 tribes?
No, mixed multitude.
No. It was, the text tells you that it was many other peoples joined
Yes.
with Israel, the 12 literal descendants
Yes.
of God. Many of, and it's fascinating. We discovered this in our Thursday night Bible study. What was the spy? And each tribe sent one of the 12 spies into the promised land. What was the spy's name selected by Judah? Caleb. Who was Caleb?
A Gentile.
A Gentile. In fact, it was even worse than just any old regular Gentile. It was a Canaanite. Who was Canaan? He was the son of Ham who was cursed by God. Remember that whole story after the flood? And Noah's sitting there getting drunk, which you think he would have got drunk before, but
But see, it's a goyim, it's a Gentile, who was obviously joined with Israel, and he's been included in the kingly line.
yeah,
Judah.
exactly. And we see integration of these Gentiles that joined with Israel. And Deuteronomy chapter 4. If you have not read that chapter, you need to read it. What is the purpose? What was the purpose, and still is the purpose of the people of God, Israel?
To be a light to the
To show
nation.
Thank you very much.
To be a light to the nation.
Both are right, exactly. In fact, the text says that I have given you this law, so when the peoples of the world come into your land and they see what wise principles that you live by, they'll convey that wisdom and they'll convey it to me, your God, and they'll go, wow, you must have a really wise God. The implication, I'm going to take this really wise God home and spread the good news. I found the wisest God on earth to start worshiping. The mission of Israel was always to be lights. In fact, what does the last verse in Matthew say? That's the purpose. Go out to all the world and put your light under a bushel.
No, make them students, make them Talmudim.
Exactly.
You know, John, here's what's interesting. We're called to be a light. What do we just talk about? The Ish and Isha? We're supposed to glow with light. In other words, our hope as we are joined to God at the end, we will be that light that we're supposed to be now. In other words, it'll be a fulfillment, a completion of that. So you're being a light now. That's what if you're in God's kingdom, you're supposed to be a light. Well, the end result will be that God says, great, you've been a light, now I'm going to have you glow like one. Literally, not figuratively. Okay, that's the whole purpose. And all you are is what? In marriage with God. And what do you reflect? God. You reflect light, you reflect God. That's the whole purpose.
And then Paul piles on this whole concept of this expanding concept of Israel. God started with the Jews, the Ibiru, the Hebrews. And he said, this is your mission. And the concept throughout the Bible is your mission is to expand the definition of my bride, my people. Paul piles on in Romans 9, 6 through 8. I almost out of time, so I won't read it.
We'll stop with this.
Very, very fascinating passage because it says that not everybody who is a descendant of Abraham will be saved. It's worse than that. Is Israel.
Right.
God, and you know what? That's been true forever. What did God do whenever he found sin, rebellion type of sin, in the camp? Okay, not to worry, we'll just let them live in our midst. No, he opened up the earth and down they went alive.
Or he told them to strap on their swords and kill them all.
Yeah, he expunged the non-believer. And I think that has always been the definition of Israel. Those who have their hope. We don't see it because the languages, the interpreters aren't consistent very much. But Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the other Hebraic patriarchs believed and trusted. They had faith. And they relied on this same promise that we do. Post-cross, that God would come and save them someday and give the power back to us to make choices to be alive again. Because we're dead without him. We're the walking dead.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and I
went there.
Yeah, I had to go there. But Paul it's an interesting passage. Go home and read chapter 9 in Romans. Because it's emphasizing something, a truism, that sometimes doesn't come out in just reading the Torah text, sometimes. That God has always defined. Remember, there's a passage in Deuteronomy that says, anybody who adds or subtracts to this is in trouble. Right? Well, he's not going to violate his own rules. So anything he says in the New Testament has been or is true in the Old. So when he says things like Israel is not the people that are identified as Israel aren't necessarily bloodline. In fact, it makes it very clear. I don't have the verse memorized. It makes it very clear that the Gentiles are included. Now, I'm not even touching or coming anywhere near replacement concepts.
No.
What I'm saying to the Jew first and to the Gentile, God gave the Hebrews this masterful document. And many of them followed it and actually fulfilled their
And today
purpose.
still follow.
That's right. But as one of the reasons why we know the Old Testament historical recordation is true is most of the recordation is about the failures of God's people. Well, that doesn't mean, God goes on and on, but every time they do fail, he says there's always a remnant that are holding on to the truth. So is it today. There's a remnant of Gentiles and Hebrew people. But Israel is a concept that Paul made clear should have been from and has an expanding concept of God's bride. Like Adam said earlier, from Sinai on, Israel, the word was applied to God's betrothed bride.
With that, let's close it. Who's ready to be a light? Good. Seriously. I mean, seriously, as we read God's Word, it should excite us and motivate us to start to step out that way. I want to reflect God. I want to reflect His love and His ways, and He gives me, guidelines to how to do that. Absolutely, I'm going to go do that. And guess what? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all the fruit, that's supposed to be what comes from it. Okay? Joy, peace, all those things. And so, as we're closing, and as we're reading this, that God's bride is the New Jerusalem, you're going to enter into one of those gates. Okay? Each of us. I know which gate I'm going in because I know my bloodline. Okay? It's Levi. It's a Kohanim. So I know God will have me going through the gate that says Levi. Okay? Caleb, which means loyalty in Hebrew, is going to obviously go through the gate for Judah because he was chosen for that. That's what God assigned for him. So you're going to enter into one of those gates. We need to be thinking this way. And if we think in the way that we are the bride, then we need to start acting accordingly.
Well, and the thing that is maybe profound is that in order to get into the city, which by the way is the bride, you have to go through one of the gates that are named after the 12 tribes. Okay, so what is it communicating? You have to be Israel. You have to, it's not a prerequisite, but people that are the bride are Israel, is the concept.
And it's
That's
not
being
dependent on the
conveyed.
bloodline.
Right.
That's right. So with that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you. And Lord, as always, I marvel at your word. We marvel at your word. And just the insights, the treasures, the gems that you scatter along the path, and also those that you put down in this below the surface for us to dig out. Because the process of the digging changes us and draws us closer to you. So I pray, Father, as we go away this week, that we would be impassioned, emboldened to step forth with excitement, with joy, with love and passion, to pursue you in your ways. Father, with a deeper realization of who you are and who we are in you. And so, Father, I pray that your Spirit, that your glory would shine through us to others, because I know you don't desire anyone to go to destruction. Father, you desire all to be drawn to you so you can share who you are with them and share your blessing. So we thank you and bless you. B'Shem Yeshua. Amen. Please rise. Please join me at the Kidney Heron song. And I find this interesting, as part of this blessing is what? It says, may his face shine upon you. In other words, may the light of who he is come down on you. So please join me at the King Herod song. Yivorech Adonai v'yishmorecha. Ya'er Adonai panav lecha v'chonecha. Yisa Adonai panav lecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance to you and grant you peace. So may it be his will. Amen.